All of us.
All of us are guilty.
All of us are guilty.
All of us.
All of us.
All of us.
All of us are lost.
All of us are lost. Lost.
Lost.
Hello and welcome to All of Us Are Lost, a rewatch podcast delving back into the mysteries of the island 20 years on. I am Kat and I am joined as always by Andy as we delve into the mysteries. But those of you watching on YouTube will notice that we are not alone today. We are joined by writer, producer, director, horror cinephile and Labyrinth fan, Jed Shepherd. How are you doing, Jed?
I'm good, thank you. You should have put the Labyrinth first. That's my main thing. Really happy to be here. And Lost is one of my favorite shows ever. So anytime we get to talk about Lost, I'm happy.
And when did you first get into Lost? Were you there at the pilot, with all the advertising like myself, or did you come to it later?
I came to it later, I think, because when something's really hyped, and I remember all the adverts for it on it was Channel 4. Was it Channel 4 originally, or was it Sky? Channel 4, right?
It was Channel 4,
And I remember the adverts for it, and I was like, wow, what was this? But it had so much hype behind it, and I'm quite a contrary person when it comes to like hyped TV shows and films. So I'm just like, oh, I'm not going to watch this. Everyone else can watch this. I'm going to watch my obscure little horror movies. So I actually waited, if you can believe it, till I think it was season 4 I jumped in, just because I couldn't bear to not be part of the of this pop culture conversation anymore. So so I watched episode 1 of season 4. I think that was the first episode I watched, and then I was like, oh my god, I've been missing out. So I quickly, before episode 2, I think I watched seasons 1, 2, and 3 within the space of like a week or so, and so I could catch up. But yeah, it's incredible to me, and I do have a really I think there's an episode of Lost that's the best TV episode of all time, and I also had watched the finale with a group of friends of mine, and one of them is unfortunately no longer with us as well. But it was one of his favorite shows. And I remember staying up till I think it was like 3 or 4 in the morning UK time for the final episode. We were all huddled around uh, our TV, and I think we were all like, because we were all guys, trying not to look at each other as we were like bawling our eyes out, like just like, okay, we can't see each other cry, look straight at the TV. But it was, and like and my friend died later on that year, so I always felt like at least he got to see the end of Lost. That because like if you left the Earth without seeing the end of Lost, that would have been really bad. So he got to see the end, so that's good. But just overall, it's so inspirational to me. The characters are incredible. I've revisited it a lot, and yeah, it's one of the most perfect shows.
And with you saying that obviously you didn't start till season 4, nowadays that's almost impossible. Like, I've found myself quite lucky with like shows nowadays like Severance. I've never seen an episode of Severance, but because I'm not in the kind of chat around it, I've managed to avoid it. But I think Lost was at the time was so ingrained in general culture as well. Like, you knew about Lost even if you hadn't seen it. It would have been almost impossible nowadays to kind of avoid any spoilers. And it was lucky that you were able to get that. And I'm sure you would have heard bits and pieces as you went, but not knowing what's going on before witnessing it, it would have kind of just blew over you, if you know what I mean.
I think so, but like, by the time season 4 came around, there were websites up about like Lost theories and stuff, and as soon as I started watching Lost, I was really into the theories, and in between times, like from week to week, I would spend all day at work looking at Lost theories on the internet. And do you remember? I'm sure you guys remember. There was that website where that guy had basically predicted what was going to happen in Lost until the final episode, and I don't even think the writers knew what would happen at the end, but he got it pretty much spot on. He like, and we don't because everything just comes at once, like on Netflix. I know Apple's a bit different, but on Netflix everything drops at once. We don't get the experience of that event TV anymore, where we all talk about things um, on a week to week basis, and we all have theories,
Mm.
and we don't have that excitement. The nearest thing we've got to it is actually Severance, because I find myself doing the same thing I did with Lost, and I as soon as an episode finishes, I'm straight on Reddit and I'm looking at theories and people's
Mm.
explanations of what they think happened, and I've got my own explanations. Um,
Mm.
and I've got so many friends who watch it, so it's a real collective group experience watching something like Severance and previously Lost. So yeah, I think it's important to have these kind of shows because it just keeps us excited about television.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah.
And this was, we've mentioned before in the podcast, Lost kind of was one of those TV shows that really did start the boom of TV. Before Lost, if a mainstream actor went to television, that was their career was over. But now, with Lost, this was a sort of show that then started everyone's career. What was your sort of, thinking
hmm
about how Lost has kind of changed that TV format?
Yeah, I mean it's premium TV, and even in those Channel 4, adverts for the first episode for the pilot, I just remember thinking, this looks like a movie. This looks like a big budget movie. And I also think I remember myself thinking, how can we compete in this country when we're putting things out like the In-Betweeners, and they've got Lost? Like it's like on a different level. Um, so cinematic. And I also think, yeah, I mean there were obviously loads of really cool TV shows before, but Lost, just with that pilot episode, was so expensive as well. It just brought cinema to TV shows in a way that I hadn't seen before. And, some people aren't happy with the ending of Lost, but again, it's not about the ending to me. It's about the journey and the experience of watching Lost and living with these characters. So, I've never really had that with another TV show before or since
Mm.
Lost. So, maybe Twin Peaks, maybe, but not on the same scale as Lost. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, I think this is an incredibly important show. Made a ton of people's careers in front and behind the camera, and I doubt there will ever be a TV show on the level of Lost in terms of scale and cultural impact.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and everyone and most people were unknowns in it as well, so they didn't rely on any star power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For yourself, obviously, you've got like with host and flashback horror and sci-fi elements in your movie making. Was there not direct comparisons to Lost, but would that have been a big influence on you? Was it maybe most possibly more so with flashback, maybe?
100%, yeah, that is a very astute, because flashback is so I think that the best episode of television ever is The Constant, is the episode The Constant from Lost, and
Mm.
and then flashback is basically my version of The Constant, and like the whole time I was doing that with Netflix, I was thinking, okay, this is basically The Constant. I'm kind of doing The Constant, and if you watch that episode of Lost and then watch flashback, you'll be like, oh, like Jed just ripped this off. And like subconsciously I probably did, but just a different method of spoilers time travel. Um
Mm.
but yeah, so yeah, no, it's very, very, very influential. So much so that Netflix made me cut it out, but I had a scene where there was a analyst character who was analyzing. He was the therapist to Gemma, basically, and that was meant to be played by Desmond from Lost. So I'd got him locked down, but he was in Hawaii, and there was a cost element and there was a visa element of it as well.
Mm.
So, but yeah, I had Desmond to be the therapist in my thing. So, but yeah, but then they made me cut it out. They said it was unnecessary, and I was like, no, it isn't unnecessary because it's Desmond from Lost. So,
Yeah.
at some point, I'm gonna put him in something.
Yes. I sat through 5 seasons of The 100 purely because of Desmond from Lost, and it's a great show,
Yeah,
but he was the draw to that. So yes, I
he's
await that
awesome.
future project.
Yeah, he's awesome. Like, yeah, over lockdown, we just started speaking to each other. So he was just like, "Yeah, well, when you have something coming up for me, let me know, and I'm in." So I'm like, "Wow, okay."
Listen,
And
Scottish are weirdly patriotic, so anytime we see a Scottish person in something, we just kind of latch onto it. Like we've done it with McAvoy and done it with Desmond, Gerard Butler. We just, yep, they're our guys. It's brilliant to see them in anything.
He
So
is,
I'll be, yeah,
but he's
100%
far
on
away
board.
from Scotland now. He's still
Yeah,
in
yeah,
Hawaii. You know, he loved it so
I
much
know.
after filming Lost. He's still there.
I know when we sort of reached out and asked you to come on the show, I think this episode that we're here to talk about numbers was one that you suggested. What was it about this episode in particular that you were keen to get involved in and talk about?
I think this is either my second or third favorite episode of Lost. A number of reasons. One, it's a Hurley centric episode, and Hurley is amazing. Two, it's a comedy episode as well. It's really important in the law of Lost because obviously it's about the numbers, how the numbers affected Hurley off the island. So the numbers are something to do with fate, and at least Hurley was always meant to be there because he knew the numbers before he got to the island. Um, and just the fact that on the island, Hurley is probably the least useful, I would say. And also he's kind of looked down upon by everyone else. But back in the real world, he is absolutely minted and loaded and
Yeah.
therefore powerful. So I really like seeing the juxtaposition between Hurley on the island and Hurley off the island. And I just like the fact he was in he was in an asylum, and and it just makes you more excited about the numbers because the numbers are like so important and integral to Lost and to its popularity as well. And yeah, because this episode is about concentrating on the numbers specifically for the first time, then I just think it's one of the best.
Mm.
Yeah, because they say this is episode 18 in
18.
season one, and this is the first Hurley flashback, which so many other characters have already had. They've had two. Jack's had two, Kate's had two, Sawyer's had two, Charlie's had two. Sun and Jin have kind of had the same their
Hmm.
sides of the same story, and yet it's taken us all the way to episode 18 to find out about Hurley, which seems a little bit mean that we've had to wait so long because we've spoken on the podcast before about how he's almost the conduit for the audience. He is the
Hmm.
character that's like, what, there's a polar bear and now there's
Yeah.
this, and it's like, no, we need to get to know him as a person outside of like the audience's voice.
Oh, exactly. And now, after this episode, now everyone is like, Hurley's the most interesting one because she's like, oh, he knows stuff. We've seen what he's like outside this world. So now we're just more, empathetic towards him rather than him being the character, who's the side character, comic relief. Now he's really important to the whole story.
Mm. Yeah. And he has been a very empathetic character as well. Like Kat was saying, he's been the conduit, but he's also been the one that was looking to take a roll call for the passengers in Ireland just so they could get to know each other. He has taken on board like talking to Charlie and things like that as well. And he has been comic relief, but I think, as you said, there's an empathy there as well. And he's just having him get his own sort of mini story within this. While there is still a lot more going on in this episode as well. Um,
Hmm.
a particular sort of side story around Locke and Claire. Um,
But
have you?
also, just quickly,
Sorry, no.
I think one of the things that this episode does is maybe give you, or some people at least, an inkling or suggestion that maybe, and this is how I felt when I first watched it, maybe Hurley is still in the inside the asylum, and this is all in his imagination. So, and I forgot that until I rewatched it, like just a couple of days ago. I was just like, oh, I remember thinking that this may just be Hurley's imagination, this whole thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was a red herring or not, but it worked on me at least.
Yeah. I can imagine they've definitely thought of that. Like nothing really seems to be done by accident in Lost.
Hmm.
Another character that we've kind of spoke about over the episodes we've recorded is Locke and his motivations. He has a sort of subplot in this where he seems to take an interest in Claire. And he's picked up certain characters. He's got Boone as the kind of sidekick, the happy Labrador, as we've kind of mentioned him.
Hmm.
Looking at it from, obviously, we're looking at it from having seen it before, but with maybe a bit of hazy memory of it. How do you feel Locke's coming across in these the first two-thirds of the first series? Do you have any sort of inkling towards his motivation? It seems like he's building up almost like a small army.
Yeah, I don't think at this point we're even meant to know what we know that he probably knows more than other people. He's incredibly
Mm,
resourceful. You know, besides Jack, he's probably the other one that you would rely on the island as someone who could lead you maybe off the island. Um,
yeah,
but but it ties into the numbers as well because I don't know if you remember what the numbers actually mean and what they are by the end, but like luck is one of the is it called the variables? He's one of the numbers are allocated to luck. So he's been drawn to this island, but and he feels and I feel like just the way he's acting, he kind of maybe instinctively knows that. Um,
mm,
so for an episode called Numbers, like he would have to be featured. In fact, I
yeah,
think everyone who represents the numbers are featured. No, that can't be true. But anyway, yeah, I think it's important to have him in this episode to make it make sense. But then I can't remember if the writers knew what they were doing in episode one. I don't think they had an end goal yet. Um,
mm,
I mean, I know they had a Bible, a TV Bible that they kind of had, but I don't think they properly figured out what the numbers were until later on, and
mm,
how they were basically substitutes for those six people that could save the world. Um,
mm,
but yeah, it's so good revisiting this episode because I forgot how good it is.
yeah,
Like I say, it's got that comedy in it, and it's as somebody that grew up watching the X-Files, it is, Mulder and Scully would
Yeah,
occasionally have that wacky monster of the week thing where it was all a bit slightly off kilter, and Mulder and
yeah,
Scully got to have a bit of a laugh, and that's very much what Numbers feels like, and it's coming after some heavy episodes with Claire having been abducted and come back, them having face down Ethan, Jin and Son's marriage collapsing. So I kind of think we needed this
hmm,
episode, but it's so funny, but it's also so sad because Hurley plays the lottery numbers, he wins the lottery, and then his grandfather dies like during the press conference. His mother breaks her ankle, his house burns down, he gets arrested, his sister-in-law runs away. It's that sort of comedy of errors sort of thing, which I think sort of represents Hurley so well. He's this lovely guy, but it's just kind of as lucky as he perceives himself to be, it kind of feels the opposite in a lot of ways.
yeah.
mm,
It's one of those things where you know uh, the monkey's paw situation. Like you get everything you want, but it comes at a price, and the price is everyone around you dies, gets hurt, and
mm,
and he gets put into a mental institution. Um, so yeah, but that was quite funny in the episode where you just think when
yeah,
he bought his mum a house and he sees it up in flames and he gets arrested and then she does the sign of the cross because she realizes, oh, maybe he is cursed.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's really fun.
yeah, she says that we're Catholic, we don't believe in curses, and then straight away she's convinced. I
Yeah.
don't think we've got an explanation for the arresting or why he gets lifted. I don't know if that's just America, maybe.
Yeah.
Seeing a Mexican guy in a corner on a rich street could be maybe a thing for police to pick him up on, but
Well,
it's
they said that he matched the description of a drug dealer.
okay.
Um, yeah, which is I don't know about that,
Yeah.
um,
Mm.
but yeah, like everyone loves Hurley. He's one of the best characters. I mean, he's on the cover of a Weezer album, so that gives him extra points as well.
Yeah. That,
And how did you guys sort of feel about, the numbers? Would you, I know a lot of people that, did play those numbers as their lottery tickets. Is that something that you guys ever dabbled with? Did you ever risk the numbers?
I've never done the lottery.
yeah.
Oh.
But if I did,
I've done the lottery, but
yeah, have you used the numbers, Andy?
no, I never use set numbers because if you use numbers that mean something and the lost numbers would mean something to me, if you don't put them on, then that's when they come up as my feeling. So then I always have to permanently put it on. So if I do
Hmm.
the lottery, it's just random. It's just a lucky dip. So
Well,
because
actually,
you start getting into that cycle, I couldn't do it.
here's a fact that you might not know. In Scotland, talking of Scotland, those numbers came up twice in the lottery. Um, uh,
I've done it.
and back in 2015, I think it came up twice within a short period of time. Or maybe,
Mm.
yeah, it was the numbers, but the 42 at the end was transposed, so it was like 24, but then it came up like
Aye.
twice. So if you'd put those numbers on, you would have still won like a bunch of money in
Oh,
Scotland, at least.
I wish
See,
I had known that. Yeah.
eh, in America, those numbers came out on the lotto in America, but I think it was like 2011 when the
Hmm.
show was still like pretty like in everyone's head, and 26,000 people played those numbers. So although they won the jackpot, when they divided it between 26,000
Mm.
people, it was
$150.
$150 each,
Yeah.
which, feels very much like, just further fuel to Hurley's idea that the numbers are cursed because it's like, yeah, I've won the
Yeah.
lottery. Oh, I've won 150. Yay.
That's a classic lost thing. Yeah, I won. How much have you won? 150 quid. Um, but I've seen those numbers tattooed on people. I've seen those numbers
Mm.
like absolutely everywhere. They're iconic. Absolutely iconic.
Mm. Yeah.
And yet this is the first episode where they properly make an appearance. It's like suddenly
Mhm.
Hurley sees them scribble down on Russo's notes and he's obsessed with these numbers. And then we're like, oh, there's numbers now. What are these numbers? And
Hmm.
that, as you were saying earlier, Jed, this then becomes a big mystery for the rest of the show. And I think it's such an interesting way to introduce it. With just like if Hurley hadn't been stood talking at that point in time, he wouldn't have seen those notes. And
Hmm.
when then would we have found them? So it's quite interesting that they've brought them in now, and then these numbers later on go on to bond Russo and Hurley. So when the last time we saw
Mm.
Hurley, sorry, last time we saw Russo, was with Saeed, and she was very standoffish. And yet here, she's quite willing to trade with Hurley. And I mean, whether that's just to get out of the hug because she doesn't seem like a hugger,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's just very interesting the way that they're introduced and the power that they have over somebody like her.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and though the numbers have, I guess technically they have been introduced before, but in like they're spread apart in different things. Because obviously, Oceanic Flight 815 and 815 is like 24815. So that so the numbers have been present within Lost, but
Mm.
just we didn't realize that how significant they
Mhm.
were. But
Yeah.
I like the Russo character, by the way, because it's all the oceanic people, they've got each other, they've got their lives, they have a little community, but she's like Bear Grylls. She's building traps, you know a fighter. I love that because that environment is not conducive to a single person surviving. and she's managed to.
Mm.
You know, there's smoke monsters out there. There's all kinds of crazy stuff out there.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting as well, though, initially when Hurley mentions the numbers and he says, "Do you know what these mean? Or do you know anything about them?" And she's kind of just like, "No." But when he presses her a little bit more, she's like, "Well, we heard these numbers on the radio on the island. So we followed it to that's what led to the shipwreck, that's what led to her crew all basically dying, people going mad, and has led to her being stranded there." But Hurley's whole thing with them is he isn't even really looking for an answer. He's just looking for validation. Is essentially
Mhm.
like, are these cursed? She says, "I suppose so, yes." And then he relaxes, his shoulders drop. He's probably, as you said, Jed, he's been in a mental asylum now. So he's
Mhm.
probably been put in there related in some turn to the numbers. Anyone who's told
Oh
about
yeah.
them think he's crazy. But someone says, "No, you're right." And it feels like a weight off him completely.
Yeah.
He seems a bit more at peace, but they're going to cause more problems probably for him. They are etched on the side of the hatch as well. So there's that, which we still don't know what's inside the hatch yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that they've dropped these in now, and especially coming towards a point of, I think we've got maybe 5 or 6 episodes after this. It's all coming to
Mhm.
a head, and they're still throwing curveballs at you as well.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And because like the numbers are on the hatch, you know that. Yeah, it just feels like, because I think there were rumors even before I even watched it. I remember there were rumors that the writers didn't know what they were doing, that they were just like winging
Mm,
it. But having the numbers is also almost their way of saying, "Look, we do know what we're doing. Look, these numbers mean something." So I feel like the numbers was the writers' way, or the show's way of showing everyone, look, they have got a plan, because
mm.
these numbers are like, they mean something, and we've implanted this right at the start. But do you guys remember? Because I didn't remember until today. Do you guys remember why they are broadcasting the numbers on the radio out of the island? Because in the show they don't ever really say it. It's only kind of hinted at. Because there's no point in them doing that.
Mm.
Really. What?
Yeah, my memory's very, very hazy on that. Like when he goes to visit the woman and she's like, "Oh yeah, no, they heard this transmission with these numbers and stuff." That was something that I hadn't
Yeah.
necessarily remembered. So, but
No, she does mention Black Rock again. That's another thing that gets brought up, which
Yeah.
again I've got no recollection of it either. So I
So it's
can't
meant to
remember any of
be.
it.
So, and it's only because I read this. It's meant to be because obviously the Dharma Institute is on the island, and they're investigating these these numbers and stuff. But it's the Dharma Institute. They built these number stations that broadcast the numbers out there, and it's basically the way of people on the island communicating with the Dharma Initiative off the island to let them know that, okay. So as long as the Dharma Initiative off the island can tune in and hear that the numbers are still going, it means everyone's safe on the island. They can do their dharma drops, their food drops, their equipment drops and stuff. And when they don't hear that signal, that means something's wrong on the island. So
Mm,
they can either go
which
there,
would
or
be
they know
into it.
everyone's dead. Yeah,
Ah, okay. Didn't know that.
apparently that's what it
No,
is.
yeah, that makes sense. No, that's just totally no. I've got no recollection literally. So we've been going through this, and like the early, like the revelation about Kate being a prisoner. I thought that was much later on, and it was like episode 3 or 4.
Yeah,
Find out
yeah.
about Locke not being able to walk. Same like episode 4, I think, in fact, Walkabout might be episode 3.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, just absolutely like this. The kind of it's not a what's the phrase they use for it? Mandela effect almost. It's just my memory of it is just totally off
Me
kilter
too.
with
It's
what's
it's
actually
really
going
made
on.
me it's really made me want to watch the rest of it now. So
Mm,
because it's so good.
Virgil. One thing that I like is as series one is progressing, we get this more like interconnectivity between the characters. So in Boone's flashback, we see Sawyer in a police station. In Jin's in the previous episode, we see Hurley on the telly, and now we know why Hurley was on the telly. It was because he's like won big on the lottery. And in this one, as you know, Hurley's like meeting with his accountant, lawyer, whoever. He gets told about he owns a box factory, and you know John Locke works in a box factory. So it's just really interesting. And I think I sort of said this before. We were originally watching this week on week. That's a lot of detail and nuance to remember
Mm.
6, 7 weeks down the line. Wait a minute, didn't John Locke say he worked in the box factory? But then as you're watching it on, you know, something like Netflix now where you can just binge watch them one after the other, it's all there and, you know, ready to pick out. And yeah, it's really fascinating to see the little ways that they kind of nodded to all of these people do have a connection before they've even got on the island.
They're all fated
Mm.
to end up on the island.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
it's great.
also the thing about the
I
guy that
really need to watch it again.
aye. There's also the thing that which a guy killed. Well, I think he's killed himself off the top of the building while Hurley's getting told about the box factory,
Yeah,
and that's kind of just brushed over. Is that again? That might come back later on. I'm not too sure. I don't think so. But again, nothing's really done. It could be. I genuinely don't. I don't know. Like it just seems too
But
much
isn't
of
it,
a.
it's
Maybe
like, yeah.
it's
But
done
again,
comic
it's like
effect, I
Hurley's
suppose. But
just, yeah, like Hurley's got a load more money again, and he's been told, "Oh,
yeah,
you've accrued this," and then somebody else has got to die. It very is, you know,
yeah,
as
yeah,
it's the monkey paw thing. You know, every time
yeah.
he earns a dollar, somebody, you know, somebody's breaking an ankle or falling off of a roof. It's like that. My
Mm.
favorite scene is when he goes to the hospital to speak to the patient, and there's the guy up the ladder trying to change the thing, and Hurley just knows, and he's just like,
yeah,
dude,
yeah.
not now. Just
It's so
after what
funny.
we've
That was so
seen,
funny.
it's
Yeah.
done so well.
Aye.
But yeah, like there's an episode of the original Twilight Zone, like in season 2, which is about like a shopkeeper who he finds a genie, and the and he asks the genie for a million quid, and then you know he's so happy, he gives the money out to people in who need it and stuff, and then the tax man turns up and says you've got to pay $960,000 in tax. And then he's got like a fiver left, and yeah, it's that kind of thing. But I think humans just built to find that kind of stuff funny because like
Mm.
something you want like so much, and then you get it, and then you know it's not as exciting or as fun when you finally get that thing you want. And yeah, but I think you're right, Andy. It was a comedic effect that the guy's fallen or just committing suicide off the building. Um,
That's humour.
but yeah, it's great. It's great.
There's some great moments between Charlie and Hurley as well, because obviously they go off into the adventure into the woods. And I think everybody has, as we sort of said earlier, they've always kind of looked down on Hurley a little bit, maybe because of his size or because of his friendly, open demeanor. Everyone's kind of like, well, Hurley can't really do anything, and yet we see him being very spry and escaping a Russo trap. You know, he manages
Mhm.
to cross this very rickety bridge, and then at the end, you know, Charlie is very, you know, well, we've done all this, you need to tell me why. And he opens up about, you know, his darkness, you know, him being a junkie, and Hurley tells him the truth. But again, even after everything they've been through, Charlie just like, oh, bloody great, you know, I just opened my heart to you and you're just gonna tell me a pack of lies. I think it's like, as far as Hurley's come in this episode, he still hasn't quite been able to change some of the opinions about him, which I think is a bit sad.
Yeah, and then Charlie's, he's a fan favorite, and everyone loves him. And he again, Charlie's spoilers. Charlie's death is one of the best episodes of television, as well. So good, and I've thought so many times about getting Not Penny's boat like tattooed on my hand, so I can just go up to like windows and just put my hand on the window. Um, but like, yeah, and like the Charlie's kind of the comic relief as well. It's him and Hurley,
Mm.
but I love seeing Charlie so eager to like hang out with Hurley, and Hurley go, no, dude, I want to do this by myself. Um, yeah, it's these little nuances and these little relationships that build throughout all the seasons just makes you love these characters so much. Um,
Mm.
and yeah, so when finally Charlie dies, it's like heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking when he goes. And obviously, like, okay, again, I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't watched it, but yeah, just everyone in this episode is great. We only see
Yeah.
a snippet of Jack and a snippet of Kate, but yeah, just amazingly written characters.
Mm.
I think it's
Yeah, and
nice
we
that we
get
do only see like a little bit of Jack and Kate because we have spent so long with them previously. It is nice
Yeah,
to get to see somebody like Hurley have his turn in the sun, and it's just nice for a bit of cohesion and just general representation outside of the beautiful thin model-esque white people that we've had a lot of to
yeah,
suddenly be faced with this character who has been treated as like the butt of the jokes, but now he's getting to show his power. Saeed, old torture master, interrogator Saeed went up against Russo and came off not well.
hmm
yeah.
Hurley was in and out, got a battery out of it. She said hello.
yeah.
It's quite nice to give him that time.
It's so
Mm.
funny. I mean, maybe it's a trait of American TV shows, but it is funny that Oceanic 815 was just full of really good looking people. Just really good looking people. Um, because like, in, in reality, if you crash on an island, there'd be, a whole mix of different people. Um,
Mm.
and because, like Sawyer is just he's too good looking. It's almost distracting. Kate's too pretty. Like that's almost
Mm.
distracting. And so it's really good that we have someone who's uh, you know, not conforming to those beauty standards on the island in the form of Hurley, who,
Yeah.
genuinely, I think besides Desmond, he is like my favorite character because,
Mm.
um, you need that comic relief every now and again because, like you said, you get some real deep, hard episodes about torture, about relationships and marriages breaking up and people dying, and then you get Hurley like dodging traps in the woods and saying, "Don't worry, I'm spry," and just dives. So funny.
Yeah. I wonder if he'd have been worried there about anyone else getting hit with that because he knows his luck is in, but
hmm
could it have backfired and hit poor, poor Charlie or poor Said or poor Jack? But yeah, it's good. And there is a couple of moments in the episode as well. We see briefly, Kat, you were saying, we see Kate and it's soon basically saying, Jin's not going to speak to me anymore. And that's pretty much the only part you get from her in that episode, and Kate kind of consoling her about that. And then, excuse me, sorry, I mentioned it a wee bit earlier on, the development of a relationship with Locke and Claire, and you
hmm
think he's there building a trap the whole time, but he's actually looking out for her. He's built her a crib, and
Yeah.
that's again, it's another string to kind of Locke's bow. With him being the hunter, the gatherer, having witnessed things on the island that no one else has seen. He feels like he's in tune with the island. He does a lot of foreshadowing with light against dark, but then he's also just kind of acting as a friend. And I just always feel that there's an undercurrent of something with him. But overall, is this sort of act of kindness from him seems to go, seems to show a different side to him anyway.
A
Yeah,
big old softie.
yeah, but like I always think with Locke, what's his motive? Like
Mm,
it could just be that he's kind, but like you said, there's light and dark to this and to these characters. So what's he trying to get out of this situation? That's why I always think of with Locke because he's clever, he's smart as hell.
mm,
Um, so even if he does something that's kindness, I always think there's another motive.
yeah.
Well, it's really interesting in that scene because Claire, she admits to him that, she was going to have the baby adopted. And we know from a previous conversation in Outlaws that Locke spent some time in foster care. And then, in the future, we find out about his history. So there's kind of almost there's very small little like sort of his hackles getting up when he realizes that Claire wasn't going to keep the baby because that is something that he himself has been that baby. But then he kind of straightens up, adjusts, and then these two characters, he's like, yeah, but you're together now. You are going to give this baby this life. And there's this again another conversation about fate and luck, and we know that from Claire's flashback episode that she's very much about spirituality, and they're kind of connecting over this in this scene. And I mean, my thoughts at this point is that Locke is building a cult, and he's got his men, and now he's starting to work his way onto the women. And Claire, he knows that Claire was of interest to Ethan, and Ethan is of interest to him, so he's kind of wanting to get to know what is special about her that would mean that Ethan would want her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Calculating. It's very calculating. But I also
Pretty
think in
pointless.
in this first season, I do think that that the writers were throwing some stuff out there to see what would connect with the audience. So, because I don't think even by the end of the entire show, I don't think every thread was neatly tied up. So I think maybe they were floating some ideas about which characters work best together, who the audience want to see more of together. And so there were, you get these weird kind of combinations of people just to see what works well. At least in the first two seasons, I feel like. But then, towards when you get towards like, season 4 and 5, you get these, set group of people like who speak to each other the most. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's made me really nostalgic to go back and watch it all again because it's really good
It's like
storytelling.
we've spoke before about how the original plan, I think, was for Kate and Said to get together, and you can see that in the early episodes with their interactions. Jack was supposed to have been killed off after like 1 or 2 episodes. I think he was initially meant to be, was it Michael Keaton, I think, was offered the role of Jack just to get him on, and there was scheduling things. I can't remember exactly what it was. But yeah, so you've seen that early development, as you're saying. They're trying out different combinations. They're seeing what works. Charlie and
Yeah,
Hurley works. Kate, Sawyer, and Jack as a sort of three-way love triangle works. Michael just butting heads with Jin, even though it's not a positive relationship. It works in a kind of thematically, and yeah, it's
yeah.
interesting to see how they're kind of picking off those wee bits and pieces from each character.
And also like and you see it more in in flashbacks and stuff, but Jack, his name is Jay Shepherd, so like I always have an affinity towards him. So like especially in the flashbacks when you see him sign his name and you see like on his coat at one point you see Jay Shepherd, it always makes me think, oh, am I in the Matrix, or am I? Because did they make the show just for me? And this is how they're telling me, because that's how much I love this show. They're like, oh, okay, like that's their clue that they made the show just for me.
Main character syndrome.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah. Um, so recently there was the news that they're working on a Buffy reboot. Sarah Michelle Gellar has said that that is something that they are working hard on. Do you think that Lost is a property that at some point down the future they will try to remake, rejig? Can you see it working? I mean, I guess Yellow Jackets is kind of a little bit like Lost, but do you think that there could be
Yeah,
something closer to Lost?
I think the closest show to Lost is From. Um, I
It
don't know
was
if you've seen
brilliant.
From yet, but it's like the
Yeah,
same. It's the same producers and writers,
same as Damon
maybe.
Lindelof, isn't it?
Yeah, and also it's got some of the same cast as well.
Mm.
And I don't want to spoil it, but season 3 just ended, and
Mm.
I genuinely think it's a Lost crossover. And I'm not just saying that because I was like, oh no way, this is what happened in Lost. Like, um, so it feels that because we're From, the whole thing is that a group of people who are stuck in this place. They don't know how to get off it. Weird stuff's happening. There's something in the forest.
Mhm.
You know, it's there are a lot of similarities to Lost, and I
Mm.
have a feeling that at some point there will be some kind of crossover, or at least some shared elements. Yeah, because like I was just waiting for the end of season 3 for a Dharma Initiative logo to appear. That's how
Yeah.
much I think this is a Lost crossover. But to do an
Mm.
actual reboot of Lost, I think it's inevitable. I think it's a matter of when, not if. Just because
Mm.
these studios, they like money, so
Yes.
they will do it. And to their credit, you can, because the conceit of what the island is, it could happen again. Like, something could happen where the world might be ending and they need some people to come to the island and fix it. So
Mm.
I feel like it could happen again, but it shouldn't be a reboot. It should be a continuation. Maybe you have a couple of the same characters, if that's even possible. Because I think, and I'm one of the people that think that I really like the ending, but I also think the
Mm.
ending is ambiguous. And also, I think maybe there was a period of time between the last scene of Lost and the scene of Jack on the island. I feel like there could have been some time in between that, so that we haven't seen yet. So maybe that could be the show. Like, what
Mm.
happens when Jack is laying down and he's about to close his eyes. You can start from there, you know.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
There's
I don't
also
know.
the fact there's a scene where Hurley and another character, I can't remember who's in the van, find Michael, and they say you've got some work to do. And I think that was just, I don't know if that was just a DVD exclusive. I think it might have been. It was like a wee 10-minute shot that was
I remember
set
that.
after the
Yeah.
fact. So you've got, not Michael,
Yes.
sorry, Walt.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've
Yeah.
got
Yeah. Yeah.
Walt,
Yeah.
who is kind of seen as this special character. Could you have the legacy sequel sort of with him? Is he going back? Is he taking previous survivors? You could have just try to go off the top of my head. Maybe Claire's baby. I don't know what long term. I cannot remember what happens with it. But you could have something maybe like that if you're going down a reboot, or like a legacy sequel is the kind of in thing to do just now. Maybe it won't be in a few years, but that could be something that you go and maybe if we're looking at where Jack is at that point and spirits and stuff, and I don't know. Maybe that's a way to look. Could be.
Hmm.
Mm. I mean, is it something that you're keen to do, Jed, or are you busy with
Oh, of
your
course. I would.
million and one other projects?
I I would pretty much drop everything to work on Lost. Like, I really
Mm.
would. Um, just because, I think it's a it's such an important show, not just to me, but to popular culture and the world in general. Um, but yeah, I think it would have to be a bit different because we've seen the Lost story, so it would need to be slightly different. I don't know how, but
Mm.
I could just imagine the teasers for it. It would be like during the Super Bowl, it would just be a black screen, and you would just see the numbers pop up, and then the Lost logo appears, and then
Aye.
that's it, and then don't say anything else, and people would go insane. People would go mad. And everyone's still, relatively young and working, so um, oh yeah, I would kill to do that.
Yeah.
Or, you and Henry need to do a project together, so why not?
We do. Yeah. I mean, I my I would I'm one of the people who I just want to cast everyone from my favorite shows. So, like, you know, if it's not Lost, I would definitely cast, like, a lot of the main guys in something together. Maybe if I do a TV show, um, yeah, I can cast them all together again. But like I said,
Mm.
from is the closest thing to Lost for me. Um,
Mm.
so maybe I'll get to
Yeah.
work on that at some point if it keeps going.
Yeah, I've loved that. The this finale that won't spoil it, but I thought it was fantastic. Like just It's so grim.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
dark.
yeah,
Very little comic relief in that in comparison to what you get in Lost, but
yeah,
it's
yeah.
definitely can see the similarities. Yeah, I think it
Hmm.
says another 2 seasons of that they're talking. So fingers
Yeah.
crossed.
Hmm.
So what are you working on at the moment, Jed? Obviously, you kind of burst into everybody's pandemic with Host, and then you continued to work. I think what most recently it was the Blair Witch documentary and the second site
Yeah.
release of that. What are you working on? I know you're still at the video game ticking over in the background, but what's
Hmm.
your sort of focus at the moment?
I've got I'm trying to think of what I can say. So hopefully I'm shooting two features this year. Um One like in the summer or September, and then hopefully one in a couple of months. And the one I'm about to do is I can't say what type of horror, but it's not found footage, it's a traditional horror movie set in the UK, um, from the producers of Mandy. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, so I can't say too much about that. But it's yeah, they're really letting me do some crazy stuff. So yeah, so I'm really excited to do that. So we're out to casting for that one now, to cast all the roles. So yeah, hopefully we get who we want. Yeah, so those two movies. I'm a producer on a bunch of different projects, which I can't talk about now, but some pretty big ones. Um, yeah, and I'm also a producer on a bunch of short films, cool short films, which will be in the festival circuit this year. Yeah, and I'm just writing and writing and writing. I'm working with the Blair Witch guys on something. Can't say. Yeah, there's just tons of stuff.
Is there
As somebody
been
that
any?
oh,
Oh, sorry.
I was
Um,
going to say, okay, Andy.
the last time I spoke to you was just after the release of Flashback, and you were looking at possibly developing that into a full length
Yeah,
feature. Have you got anywhere with that?
yeah. I signed the contract with Netflix for the feature like a while ago. They're just waiting for me
Mm,
to finish writing it, basically. But
right.
you'd think I'd be hyped about that. Uh, but I want to do these other films first before I do the Netflix one, because the Netflix one is like
Mhm.
a big budget extravaganza. Um,
Yeah.
and that's being produced by Sam Raimi as well. So that one will be cool. But I want to do some other things first and then do that one. And yeah, and they're happy to wait for me. It's no rush on their end. So
Good.
um,
Aye.
yeah, but that was that. It's a little bit different from the show though. It's more Sam's convinced me to go in a slightly different direction. So yeah, I just was just like, yeah, okay. Like I trust that he knows what he's doing. So um, yeah, and I'm working with Sam's daughter on some stuff as well. She started directing things, so I've been writing stuff with her too.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was going to say, obviously, as somebody that lists the Blair Witch Project as one of their favorite films, favorite found footage films and stuff. The fact that you have now been able to get a relationship with the creators, what does however old year old Jed when they first saw Blair Witch, what do they think of present Jed?
it is really cool to be honest. Like I always, it is the Blair Witch Project is obviously probably the most influential film to me, and yeah, just getting to know those guys has been over the last few years has been really, really, really cool, and getting to put my knowledge of that film in a documentary and it's been incredible because I'm like one of the only people who've ever seen all of the raw footage of the Blair Witch Project, like 50 hours, 60 hours of raw footage of the Blair Witch Project. And I got to go through all of that, pick out my best bits, put it in the documentary, and then help choose all of the extras that went onto the on the disc too. And yeah, just getting to hang out in Burkittsville and hanging out with the guys has been really cool. And yeah, you're right. And I mean, I in the last few years, I've had a lot of moments like that where I pinch myself kind of moments where being a horror fan as a kid, I just never thought would happen, and yeah, it has. But I just think it's always very, very lucky that the one thing that I love the most, which is horror, is the thing that I get to do. And I think, if you're really passionate about something, it doesn't really become work. It's just fun 24/7 because you're doing the thing that you love the most, and therefore you put in all your time and passion into it. And I don't sleep very much, and I'm up like 20 hours out of the 24, and that whole time I'm thinking about horror films, I'm writing horror films, I'm making horror films, I'm lining things up, I'm fixing things. So yeah, it's really fun. But I'm still at the start of my journey though. I've still got lots of stuff I need to do. I've got plans for this year.
Look forward to it.
And I introduced you at the start, by mentioning Labyrinth again recently in the news. There's potentially going to be a sequel with, maybe Robert Eggers, kind of
Mhm.
in a bit of a complete left turn, I feel, for what he's done in the rest of his career. How are you feeling about this, potential Labyrinth continuation? Because I know that the story did continue in some manga comics, but how are you feeling
Yeah.
about that news?
Um, you can quote me on this. I don't think that's going to happen with Robert Eggers for a number of reasons. One being, if you look at how many people have been attached to Labyrinth over the last 40 years, it's every single director you can think of, every genre director you can think of has been attached. 2 years ago, it was Scott Derrickson um,
Mm.
doing it, and that never happened. You'd think Scott Derrickson could do it because he's a great director, um, and I just don't think Robert Eggers would do something like Labyrinth because there's a comedic element to it. I'm not 100% sure I've seen him do that before. Um, but I welcome more in the Labyrinth universe. But I speak to Henson all the time because I've got a relationship with them. Obviously, trying to do stuff with Henson all the time. I'm linked to a few Henson Henson things, but I always try and bring Labyrinth into the conversation about what they're doing with it, and I don't feel it's a priority for Henson. I feel like they want to create new IP rather than rely on their old IP. So I just don't think it's going to happen. And if it does, that's going to be a couple of years at least out of Robert Eggers' life where he could be making more films because something on the scale of Labyrinth is much bigger than Nosferatu. It's much bigger and more expensive.
Mhm.
Because the Dark Crystal TV show that was the most expensive TV show ever in Netflix history. Um,
Wow.
so I just don't think because Labyrinth. Just imagine now how much Labyrinth would cost. I just don't think he would do it personally.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I met him at a party in December, and he was saying he was quite happy staying in his, in history. He didn't want to do anything modern, and he
Mhm,
was mentioning the Werewolf project, which has been announced, and also maybe
mhm.
a Victorian project. I kind of feel like the sort of duty was that he would have quite happily sort of just splurged Labyrinth if that was something that was realistically. So I think I'm kind of have this similar sort of feelings as yourself with like I'll believe it when I see it sort of thing. Because also he doesn't really have a history of working with puppetry, which I feel that you need.
Yeah,
Um, you know, we
and
need a Steve Konstansky
oh my
Labyrinth.
god, that's a really good shout. Yeah, so me and Steve, we've been talking about working together on something as well, and I'll put it out there. So me and him have been talking about remaking Kroll. Uh,
Nice.
I said to him, I'll write it for you, man, if you want to direct it and make the. So we've talked about that a little bit. He's doing a sword and sorcery one now, but no, he's perfect. He's perfect to do that. I met him in 20. I want to say 2016. I met him um, when he did The Void, and I love all of his stuff. Like Frankie Frico is so funny and so good, and obviously Psycho Gorman is an amazing movie. He's so flipping talented, that guy. Um, but yeah, he would be good. Obviously, I would be good. That's all with Labyrinth.
That's it.
But
You write it,
yeah,
and Steve will do all the puppets, and and
that would
then
be
we
great.
recast the David. We recast the Goblin King as Desmond, and everything is great.
That's a good shout. Um, yeah, but I mean, either way, I really want to work with puppets. Um, there are a couple of projects I'm attached to with Henson that are like brand new. Um, one of them's a comic book adaptation, and one of them's this brand new idea that they've had. But you know how these things go, like they like don't want to like get your hopes up too much, and that's why I think the Robert Eggers thing won't happen because a lot of times big hot directors they get attached to things, or they're offered something and they get given a time period where they can take it up if they want to, but they don't necessarily ever do that, and then the next hot director comes along and then they get offered it. It's just what happens. But I personally don't think Labyrinth will happen for a long time. Just the priorities at Henson aren't old IP.
Mm. Suppose they've got the continual IP with the Muppets, don't they? So they've got that continuation thing, and they can just having that focus is maybe a bit more admirable actually, because everything just now is about current IP. Maybe a bit less so in the horror genre, even though you still do get your Screams and your Saws and the sort of annual VHS, but
Hmm.
it's quite admirable that if they actually want to focus on that, especially the difficulty in making those types of puppetry movies.
Yeah, they really do. Well, the Sesame Street and the Muppets, I believe they're owned by Disney now, so they don't even have
Mm,
the IP themselves.
that's
They've got like
right.
Dark Crystal and Labyrinth and Fraggle Rock, I think is still theirs. Um, but yeah, for a company to survive, you can't just keep relying on that. You need to keep making new things and make the new Labyrinth. So
Mm.
yeah, I was actually speaking to them a couple of years back, and it's project's over now, so I can probably say about it. But I was speaking to them. I know I can't say it, but them and a very big band, a very 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 big band, who wanted to make a musical. Um, and I suggested, so I was going to write and direct this musical for this big band, and I suggested it be full of puppets like Labyrinth, and they were into it. So we spoke to Henson. Henson were into it as well, but a number of reasons why I had to back out of it. Just I was too busy, and I knew this project would probably take 5 years of my life. But maybe I'll go back to it at some point if they let me. But
Well, yes. Before we accidentally walk you into saying something that you're not supposed to, now that now that you have sort of like dipped your toe back into the sandy shores of Lost, do you think that you are probably gonna go back you're gonna go back to the island?
yeah, I think so. I think it's about time. I think I haven't rewatched the whole thing for at least probably pre-pandemic, or maybe the first year of the pandemic, maybe 2020 was when I rewatched it all, like everyone did. Um, so yeah, I do. Yeah, but for me, it doesn't start getting good until like season three. I feel like they they get their bearings. They know what they're doing. There's a direction at that point. And my favorite episode's the Constant as well. So that's a bit later on in the series. So yeah, I think I will revisit. Yeah, so I appreciate you guys getting me back involved, and also bring me back on for the Constant, and also bring me back on for Charlie's demise as well, because those episodes are incredible.
I'm sure that we would be happily would welcome you back, and maybe even do the constant, and then the short afterwards, so that we can pick apart all those little homages and little things that you snuck into it.
If you have me back on for the Constant, I will try my very best to get Desmond on with me. I will try. I will ask him. I don't know how much he wants to keep talking about Lost, but I'll try. I'll try. If I say I'm on it with you, maybe he'll do
Yeah.
it.
And where can people, follow you? Obviously, social media is kind of a strange wild west at the moment, but where should people be looking, to find out about all these, projects that you've been teasing?
I've been trying to like not do social media too much anymore, but like I still infrequently post stuff when I have to. Just at Jed Shepherd in the usual places. I don't use Twitter very much. I don't use Blue Sky very much. I don't use Instagram very much. Instagram stories is probably where I am the most frequent. So yeah, if you have me on Instagram, you'll get the gist of what I'm up to, and I'll usually put my projects on there first, most likely. But like, yeah, if anyone hasn't seen the the Blair Witch documentary, it's on the second sight Blu-rays that just came out. And hopefully they'll get a proper release or streaming release so more people can see it, because
Mm.
I'm
Mm.
really, really ultra proud of that documentary. And you get to see so much more of the Blair Witch project that you haven't seen before.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Jed, and thank you everyone for tuning in and listening, and continuing this journey. Andy, where can people find yourselves on socials?
Mostly on Blue Sky and Twitter, at Nowhere Andy for both of them. I'm on Instagram as well and TikTok, but I can never remember what my at is on either of them. But just, and I don't think you can see my face either, so search Andy Connor. You might find me, maybe not. I don't know.
Find a different Andy Connor. And you can
Yeah.
find me. I am at Gizmo Shikari on Letterboxd and Instagram, and just Cat Hughes at bsky.social on Blue Sky. And yes, thank you, and join us next time as we get into a double bill of Locke and a tragic accident which results in the loss of our first fully fledged proper Islander.